Ladies and gentlemen, Behind the Line proudly presents to you another exciting edition of the Woke Turning On the Woke. This episode is brought to you by Rainbow Warriors. Are you producing a sports show and want to make sure your panel meets diversity requirements? Do you want to ensure that your show looks beyond sports and emphasizes the myth that hockey is for everyone? If you need a panel that represents every letter and color, contract the services of Rainbow Warriors. Our highly trained professionals are experts at meeting the requirements of diversity. Whether you need pretend analyst or woke activist, turd bakers or masturbators, our staff at Rainbow Warriors can satisfy your need for inclusivity. Click the link in the description below. Use my promo code TURD10 to save 10% off your first purchase with Rainbow Warriors. Do you hear it? Do you hear it? Do you hear the crying? Do you hear the agony coming from the worldwide leader in woke? Listen very carefully. The silence might be deafening. The silence might fool you into thinking that no one cares. But according to the woke media, they damn sure care. Headline at USA Today. Sports world mourns as ESPN cancels Around the Horn. Who is mourning? Who actually gives a damn that Around the Horn has been officially canceled? I would be willing to bet that most people didn't realize it was still on the air. This turd should have been canceled 10 years ago. You know, as I was drinking my coffee this afternoon, I was watching a documentary on shock jocks from the 90s and 2000s. Primary focus of the documentary obviously was on Howard Stern. Now, if you're under the age of 30, you really have no idea how massive Howard Stern used to be. The dude revolutionized talk radio, podcasters, YouTubers. We would not be here today if it weren't for Howard Stern. For the better part of 30 years, Howard Stern was untouchable. His legacy was established. He was going to be remembered as the icon of icons in radio and broadcasting. All he had to do was know when to walk away. Many people believe that Howard Stern should have retired 10 years ago. Show was in decline. 10 years of psychotherapy had changed him. It took away his edge, took away his aggressiveness. He no longer had the fight in him to maintain the number one spot. The dozens of people still listening to the Howard Stern show, they are getting Howie. They are not getting the legendary Howard Stern. I also think his softer nature, I think it has a lot to do with age, too. I mean, it's not really appropriate for a 70-year-old dude to be holding his cucumber while interviewing wannabe Playboy models. Howie is old. He's tired. He stayed too long. He went from being a hero to his audience to being the villain. The same thing happened with Around the Horn. For the first 10 or 15 years, Around the Horn, it was legendary. Tony Reali, he would have a panel of journalists, actual journalists, and they would discuss the major topics in sports. Woody Page, Tim Calishaw, Jay Mariotti, Jackie McMullen, even J.A. Adonde before he became Captain Doofus. But around 10 or so years ago, there was a noticeable change with Around the Horn. Instead of featuring actual journalists and columnists, they started featuring activists. And that one decision, it is the main reason that after 23 years, ESPN finally had to cancel this garbage. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel is in the description below. This morning on the second channel, talked about women's college basketball players rejecting the WNBA dump. Young women, they are choosing to stay in college. They are passing up the opportunity to become dump divers in the WNBA. I mean, on the surface, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you turn down the opportunity to go pro? I explain why in the video, so head over to the second channel and check it out. According to USA Today, the sports world, they are mourning the death of Around the Horn. And by sports world, they mean the unknowns responsible for the destruction of this show who no longer have a place on television. USA Today, they included a tweet from David Dennis Jr. Well, Casey, who in the hell is David Jr. Doofus? Junior Doofus is a panelist on Around the Horn and a writer for Anscape. Now, Anscape used to be called The Undefeated. It's ESPN's site that is dedicated to mythical racism. They had to rename it to Anscape once the myth of mythical racism was exposed. It's kind of hard to claim that you're undefeated when you were clearly defeated. David Doofus, he mourned the cancellation of Around the Horn by saying, "Hey friends, it's me, Junior Doofus. I didn't think it was possible for me to be on television until they put me on Around the Horn. Now the show's being canceled and my woke welfare's expiring. What am I gonna do? Outside of ESPN, there's not much demand for a no-talent Doofus." David Dennis Jr., he's not the only one who didn't think it was possible for him to land a high-profile role in television. Everyone else thought the same thing. It's the reason Around the Horn is being canceled. ESPN started featuring activists like David Dennis instead of actual journalists who knew something about sports. Mina Kimes, she also eulogized the show. "Around the Horn gave me the confidence to believe that someone like me could be on your TV." Do you notice the language? Do you notice the sentiment? The thing is, David Dennis, Mina Kimes, they're not lying. Around the Horn became the show about representation. It became the show about diversity. ESPN was more concerned with making sure people were represented instead of making sure they were producing a quality show. Let me give you some examples. If you happen to watch Around the Horn over the last couple of years, this is the quality analysis that you were given. Watch for yourself.
I do believe that any person in privilege has a moral obligation to speak up against racism and homophobia and transphobia and all those things. Like I, as a man in that place of privilege, have to speak out against these things that impact women. What concerns me going forward is those people on the fringe that do exist, that are in real life, not just internet trolls, politicians, pundits, and people of the like who are using Caitlin Clark as an avatar to lash out at the people who they have disdain for, mainly the makeup of the WNBA, black women et al.
Pride is about inclusion, so you don't love them and you don't welcome them if you're not willing to wear the patch. And calling it a lifestyle reveals to me that you've done not even a modicum of research or understanding on this topic, which is what tends to happen when a privileged class isn't affected by things.
Is it any wonder why people stopped watching? During its prime, Around the Horn was a massive ratings draw for ESPN. When the show launched 23 years ago, it was a brilliant idea. Sports fans in New York City, they think differently than fans in Los Angeles. Fans in Chicago think differently than fans in St. Louis. ESPN took journalists from these different regions. They combined them into one show. Around the Horn back then, it was a true representation of diversity. It represented diversity of thought. But as soon as ESPN focused on diversity of race and diversity of gender, the show declined. They started featuring people like Sarah Spain, who landed on ESPN's radar because she auctioned herself off as a date to the Super Bowl. My inside sources, they are telling me that auction, it ended at $0, which isn't surprising. The only way I'm going to the Super Bowl with Sarah Spain is if she is paying me to go, and even then, I'm going to politely decline. Mina Kimes got her start at ESPN by sending in a heartfelt letter about the bond that she shared with her father over the Seattle Seahawks. It's a great story. Great story. I'm happy that Mina Kimes shared a loving relationship with her father, but that does not make her qualified to analyze the NFL. Doesn't make her qualified to be a panelist on Around the Horn. Before ESPN featured the diversity panel, Around the Horn was a mainstream success. Earlier this afternoon, I found an article in the Sports Business Journal from 2013. There was mild panic back then because Around the Horn, they were averaging 753,000 viewers. Last summer, The show was struggling to reach 300,000. Earlier this week, ESPN issued a press release announcing the cancellation of Around the Horn. They didn't provide a reason for the cancellation, but if I had to guess, not being able to draw flies to a fresh turd played a critical role in their decision. The question going forward: what happens to all the panelists? For years, Around the Horn has kind of been the designated space for huge embarrassing failures. Listen to this list of regular panelists: Sarah Spain, Mina Kimes, Clinton Yates, Courtney Cronin, Kate Fagan. I've been covering the media for 5 years. I've never even heard of Kate Fagan. Jamel Hill, Bomani Jones, Dominique Foxworth. You know what most of these people have in common? Besides the fact that most of them aren't sports journalists, you know what they have in common? ESPN forced them on their audience. ESPN gave them multiple opportunities to succeed, and every time they were huge, embarrassing failures. Like I said, Around the Horn became the place for them to congregate. It was a collection of unknown failures. Jamel Hill was given the 6 p.m. edition of SportsCenter. Failure. Bomani Jones, he was given prime spots in radio, prime spots on television. Failure. Mina Kimes has been featured everywhere on ESPN, yet for some reason, they have never given Mina Kimes her own show. The only show Mina Kimes was given was a YouTube show on ESPN's account. Guess what it is? Failure. Is it any wonder why Around the Horn declined? ESPN is preparing to launch a streaming service this fall that's going to mirror the cable network. People who aren't watching ESPN on cable, they will now be charged monthly to stream it. I wonder how that's going to work out. The decline of cable and satellite, it is costing ESPN billions of dollars every year, which means ESPN no longer has additional revenue to hand out woke welfare. This is pure speculation on my part. I'm saying this based on past history and research and knowledge of how ESPN typically operates. I think we could see another round of layoffs at ESPN sometime this year. And who could be most affected by it? The diversity hires. Guys like David Dennis who contribute absolutely nothing. It only makes sense. Revenue from subscriptions on cable and satellite, they're going down while the cost to carry leagues like the NBA is going up. Is Mina Kimes really worth $2 million a year? If David Dennis is making minimum wage, he's overpaid. Again, I'm just speculating, but with Around the Horn being canceled, I think we could see ESPN let go of some of these diversity panelists. What about you? Also, are you surprised that Around the Horn is being canceled? Does this represent a shift at ESPN? Is the worldwide leader in woke moving away from woke programming? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys tomorrow.